Alrighty, Merry Christmas, guys, and I will tell you that I have a present for you guys today. I'm going to be covering two decks, both my Apocalypse decks today. I'm going to cover the basics of the Apocalypse deck. I'm going to go over all the cards that I use, and I'm basically going to make this video long for anybody who ever wants to run this deck, because this deck takes a lot of explaining and a lot of thinking, and it takes a lot of strategy to win with. So, I've decided that I'm going to start off with my defensive build, even though my modern build was the default. And then I'm going to switch over to my modern build, and I'll explain why I prefer the modern build a little bit better than the defensive build. So without wasting any more time, let's go straight into the strategy of every card and the strategy of the deck itself. Now, the Apocalypse deck is very, very, very complex to play. People think that you just set cards and wait for your opponent to attack you and then flip them over. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes you have to know when to use effects. Sometimes you have to know when to be offensive and when to be defensive. You have to know how your opponent plays. This deck takes a lot of skill to play, and I know it because I'm the only one who plays it. I can't just set Snowman all the time, because eventually it's going to become bad. I have to look. I say, I have a Sorcerer. Do I want to put Grave Squirmer in the grave and then, get a Dark and a Light in the grave early? Do I want to put Thundercleave? All of those factors have to be taken into consideration when you're playing an Apocalypse deck. And I'm basically going to go over all of the cards in this build, because the only difference between this build and the modern build is the Tour Guides and an extra dimensional prism. Besides that, the cards are completely identical, and I've figured out over the course of 7 months that I think this build is by far the most competitive and the best build to play. So, without wasting any more time, let's get straight into all of the cards. And I'm telling you guys, this will be a long video. I can't make this video short because this deck takes a lot of explaining to make. Because this deck has so many elements to it. I'm going to go over the side deck, I'm going to go over the extra deck, everything for you guys for being great subscribers to me. So, starting off, Blackluster Soldier is the boss monster of the deck. I never draw this guy, but that's not important. Blackluster Soldier gives me that scooping factor. He gives me that sacking factor. He gives me that factor that I can OTK somebody. My deck has quite a few Dark and Lights, and because of that, Blackluster Soldier and Chaos Sorcerer are good options. At first, I didn't really like Chaos Sorcerer. I preferred to have another card to just run it over, but I realized Chaos Sorcerer really does have his value to the deck, because he gives me a card that can get over big boss monsters by himself. I thought about it clearly, and I said, wait a minute, this card is the same thing as DD Warrior Lady or Bullblader, but the thing is that he's even stronger, and he has an effect that can kill without him being killed, and because of that, he's a great card to have. The only problem is sometimes Chaos Sorcerer and BLS can kind of be bad cards in the hand because they require setup, and for a deck that is not completely reliant on a Chaos Engine, it's sometimes a little difficult to get these guys out, because I'm always having to put certain cards in the graveyard. And when I'm starting off with a hand, let's say I have two Snowmans, a Mole, an ID and a Bullblader. Let's say I have a hand like that, and then I draw, and I started off with Sorcerer. It's kind of hard to get it in the grave at that moment. And the thing is that when I start off with Sorcerer and BLS, it's really hard to win in those conditions unless I have the conditions set, or I can make the conditions set, and if I have other good cards, because these two cards require 4 cards to be banished, and that's a lot of Veilers, DD Warrior Ladies, Grave Squirmers, Thunder Kings, IDs that have to die in order for them to come out. I made a video recently, and I put it on YouTube, about how I basically splashed a Sorcerer and a BLS on the field, and that shows you that when I don't draw them first turn, it's a lot better for me, because I can basically OTK you whenever I feel like it, but I have to save my resources wisely. So, these two, I wanted to explain them at the same time. They're basically just boss monsters that help the deck and its power, because the biggest problem with this deck is offense, because this deck doesn't have a consistent offense, especially the defensive build. The defensive build is more reliant on my opponent. than the Modern Apocalypse. The Modern Apocalypse, I feel like I control my destiny in that deck, and that's why I prefer to play that build to others. Bull Blader is basically an extra DD Warrior Lady. I have a lot of scenarios with an Apocalypse deck where I open up, and when I say scenarios, I'm sorry, I meant to say with this build. With this build, I have a lot of scenarios where I have a Snowman, I top deck a Snowman, I set it. I top deck a Grave Squirmer, I set it. I top deck a DD Warrior Lady, which can kind of be a better card in certain scenarios, and I set it. Set. I have nothing to attack with. So then, I'll go 3 or 4 turns of just setting monsters, and then, you know, my opponent eventually gets monsters that are going to attack mines, and then, because I didn't have the monsters to attack them, because I went for 3 to 4 turns without attacking my opponent, I basically lost the duel. Now, that's why DD Warrior Lady and Bull Blader are really important. She's probably the most versatile card in this build, because she can serve as a defensive card and as an offensive card, and that's what makes her really special, and that's why I run her at 3. People who do not know how my deck runs run 2, and I say that's not how it works. I need to run 3 because I have to get over a lot of things that my opponent may have. Now, let's say my opponent summons Zen Mines. I summon Warrior Lady, I banish it with her. If my opponent sets Maestro, Gachi, she summons a strong monster that has an extremely high attack power that I can't get over. You know, I'm gonna have to lose some life points, but I can get over it with DD Warrior Lady. And at the same time, Bull Blader is really good because he can kill face down defensive monsters by me just saying effect, and it goes straight to the graveyard. None of their effects resolve. I mean, if it's a flip effect, yeah, but I just pop it. If it's a Spirit Reaper, if it's a Marshmallow, I just get rid of the card. DD Warrior Lady does it too, but she loses her life, where he keeps his. But the thing is that he's an Earth, and he doesn't let me bring out these 2 cards. One more thing I'm going to mention about Sorcerer and BLS is, in next format, if any of these cards get hit, I'm going to have to completely change my build. I'm telling you guys now that the Apocalypse deck would be extremely different next format if BLS gets hit, because that means I'm going to have to base the deck around more of a beatdown strategy than relying on a BLS that never comes anyways. But, I mean, this build is still pretty good. I mean, BLS is a legitimate boss monster, but at the same time, he requires me to run cards like Veiler, DD Warrior Lady, Thunder King, which are cards I would run anyways. But it makes BLS a little too reliant on these cards, and that's one of the problems with the Apocalypse deck, is that sometimes Sorcerer and BLS can kind of be detriments at certain times. So moving on, Effect Veiler. These cards are basically generic. Everybody uses Effect Veiler. I need to use them to stop cards, just like everybody else does. I mean, there's not much to explain here. I really can't think of anything else to say. I just need to run Veilers because I don't want to get slapped with a Logia first turn and I couldn't stop it. I mean, it's really good against certain decks, and that's why I run Veiler. Now, Gores used to be a card I didn't run in older builds, and Gores is one of the reasons why I don't run Solemn Warning, and I'm going to make a video on that really soon as to why I hate Solemn Warning. But Gores is a really powerful card, and he kind of gives my deck that third boss monster that I can rely on, because a lot of times my deck is very good at stopping OTKs, and Gores works really well with ID, which I'll explain in 1 second. This build runs Grave Squirmers. Grave Squirmer is an awesome card because he gets over Skill Drain, and he can kill Skill Drain, and he can kill cards by being sent to the graveyard. Grave Squirmer also works great with ID, but one of the problems with Grave Squirmer is very similar to what I was saying about Snowman Eater and DD Warrior Lady, and the overall problem with the deck. That sometimes having a Grave Squirmer just sitting on the field for too long can be a bad thing, because my opponent is just going to avoid it until they can eventually kill it, and then eventually kill me, and then I have to rely on more offensive cards to fight my opponent with. Grave Squirmer is great, just like Snowman, because he is a dark, so he lets these guys come out a little easier. He brings this guy out. but basically because he can kill any card on the field. I think Grave Squirmer is awesome because he can kill a spell, a trap, he can kill whatever I feel like. But at the cost, he has 0 attack and 0 defense, which is kind of a detriment because that means he's only defensive. And the fact that he can kill opposite cards really gives this card a push, and it really helps in winning games. Now, very rare cases, I might actually put Grave Squirmer in attack mode, because the thing is that when I put Grave Squirmer in attack mode, I can run over anything at the cost of possibly a lot of life points. But Grave Squirmer is a great card. I like him in this build, but I realize it doesn't work with Torghast. It works without Torghast. ID is the best card in this deck next to Thunder King. Without ID, this deck would not be competitive, and I'll explain why. When a monster is destroyed by battle or by card effect, this card can defend me. It can come out when I lose a Grave Squirmer. This card is really important to the deck. I usually win more duels when I draw this card, because the thing is that when I lose a Grave Squirmer, when I lose a Snowman, if you Dark Hole me, if you blow up Bullblader after he sacrificed himself, or if you use the trap or something, I am left wide open for attacks. This card stops that. This card stops OTKs, because if you attack a Snowman, Snowman kills the other monster, then I drop ID, then you can't attack me anymore. Now you have to go to your main phase 2 and do something else to get over this 2200 beater. ID has so many pros to the deck, and his only con is sometimes he can be a bad top deck, because he's useless. It's like if I draw him late game when I have no monsters, it's like that's not good. ID works best when I have a lot of monsters, and that's why a lot of people say, why do you run so many monsters? But I realize it's because ID works best with my monsters. Now, one of my friends was telling me that ID is basically my boss monster, and I thought about it, and I realized he's right. It's not a powerful boss monster like Sword, BLS, or Gores, but ID is basically a boss monster that fits into my deck's system. He actually he's like the only card that has a perfect chemistry with this deck. He can come out whenever anything is destroyed. So when my opponent goes for game and goes Dark Hole, I drop him. Defend my life points. This card can never be a bad card. It can never be bad unless I'm top decking it. Because if I'm winning, it helps me get over stronger monsters. And if I'm losing, it protects my life points. So on both the losing side and the winning side, this card is awesome. If I'm attacking my opponent for game, they go Mirror Force, I drop him. If hold on a second. Hold on, this is my friend. Alright. So, as I was saying, this guy can come out when you're using Mirror Force, Torrential, all of that. And I love using ID in combination with my own Torrentials. I love using him when a monster is destroyed. And that's why this card is probably the second most important card to the deck. Now, moving on to Mist Valley Soldier. Mist Valley Soldier is probably the least important card to this deck. But, at the same time, the ability for him to sync with so many cards makes him so viable. He can make so many synchros that don't get much play, and he can make Gungnir, which is a good card that fits into my deck strategy. This card works best at 1. It's a card that I'm rarely going to draw, but you know when I draw him, I can use him, and I can do a little synchro. I mean, do I think Mist Valley Soldier is great? Am I ever going to run him at 2 or 3? Maybe. I have 3 in real life, but I mean, right now he's at 1. He might go to 2 or 3 in the future, but you know, as for that, he's a really good card. He really shines when he fights monsters like Maestro, Zen Mines, Gachi, because I pay a couple life points, it sends it right back to the extra deck. It's like a compulse. But the fact that he's a level 4 tuner makes him viable to a lot of the synchros in my deck. I mean, he can sync with so many things in my deck. That's what makes him such a viable card. Neospatial Grapple, this is a no-brainer. Awesome card, can bounce anything back. It is kind of that extra factor to get rid of cards that negate effects or negate being targeted and stuff. Neospacian Grand Mole, he dodges cards like, what is it called, Level Limit Area B, he dodges cards like that. Neospacian Grand Mole is the shit, he can get rid of anything, he's a compulse on legs. Night Assailant. Now, there's not much to say about this card. To be honest with you, the reason I didn't run this card before is it's very simple. I didn't know this card existed. And I actually found out about this card in real life. This is the only card I figured out about in real life, and I put it into my deck instead of me using it on DN and putting it in my real life deck. It's kind of funny. I was opening Battle Pack Epic Dawn. I opened it up and I'm like, this card could work in my deck, and it's level 3 and it's dark. I'm like, where has this card been my whole life? That's essentially where I got Night Assailant. Snowman Eater, probably one of the most important cards to the deck, because Snowman Eater is just like Gravescormer, but he can live when he dies. The only thing is he's a water type, which means I can't, apply him to the Chaos Engine. But Snowman Eater's ability to suck up an attack, kill the monster, and stay on the field is just awesome. And when I have a snowman that's already on the field, I can do so much with him. I can summon a tour guide, wait for my opponent to go Veiler, and then just overlay with the snowman. I can do so many things with the snowman that's on the field. This card is awesome. It could also protect my life points, and it also forces my opponent to summon a strong monster to kill it. It's great at killing heroes, it's great at killing Blackwings, it's great at killing 6 Sabs. This card is the shit. Now, moving on to my favorite monster, Thunder King Ryo, favorite monster in the game. When I summon this card, Duality, nope. Sanguine, nope. A Reinforcement of the Army, nope. Emergency Call, nope. Oh my god, I can just go all day. This card is too amazing. Terraforming, nope. I mean, this card stops all searches in the game. This is a very powerful card. It's a 1900 beater. So he's a light, so he can be used for Chaos Sorcerer or BLS. He forces my opponent to waste a strong monster to get over this guy. So I can kill a much more valuable card by just negating it with Thunder King. This card is what I consider the quintessential point of my deck, because he does everything. He supports the Chaos Engine. He's a destructive card with his negating effect. He negates searches. He's a 1900 beater, which gets over a decent amount of stuff. There's nothing I can't do without Thunder King. He is the defensive card for negating effects. He's the offensive card for attacking. Thunder King is the best card in my opinion. I love this card more than any other card in the game. Now, moving on to my spells and traps, I'm going to go over these really quick. Dark Hole, Heavy Storm, Monsterborn. There's not much to say because these cards are staples. I mean, we all use these cards to stop my opponent. I will mention though that I used to run 2 MSTs in some builds, but then I realized that at certain points I prefer to use Gravescormer to destroy monsters, and sometimes spells and traps, and I want to have a guaranteed blowing up a spell and trap. So that's why I use MST. Smashing Ground. I used to run 3 Smashing Grounds in some builds, and I used to run Hammer Shots and stuff, because I was really focused on destroying monsters, but then I had to cut back on that destroying monster factor, and I had to make the deck more clean and balanced. And by using Smashing Ground, it just helps me get over cards. It's an extra 2 cards to get over strong monsters, and the best thing about Smashing Ground is it doesn't target. Bottomless. Staple trap cards, there's not much to say here. Dimensional Prison instead of Compulse, yes, because my deck focuses on destroying and banishing. It does not want to send cards back to the extra deck. I know Compulse has its uses, and I will explain more in a video very soon why I don't run warnings, because these 2 spots should be warnings. I hate Solemn Warning. I think it's a great card, but I just hate Solemn Warning. Dimensional Prison just gets over a lot of cards and makes them gone forever, whereas Warning, they can come back. And I mean, I know the synchros and stuff, but if it's like a I don't know, Hanzo or something, I've seen people reborn it and get their effects back if it's a Stratos. So I just like Dimensional Prison. It gets rid of the card and makes it harder for my opponent to get back. That's all. Mirror Force, my favorite trap card. I've always loved Mirror Force. I just love the fact that I can just blast all your monsters away, and because a lot of people don't run Mirror Force at 2, I wanted it too to scare people. Judgment negates anything. Not much else to say. Torrential works very good with ID because I can summon a card, blow up my own cards, blow up your cards, drop ID, attack you directly. I do that combo all the time, and Torrential at 2 really helps that factor. It really works with ID, and that's the main reason I run 2 of it. It also works good for its other reasons. I mean, it stops spamming, it stops all that extra stuff. Now, let me check my time. Alright, 10 more minutes. So, Breaker in the side deck. I know this is probably the card that you probably is thinking like, what the heck, why a Breaker? Well, usually in this build what I do is I replace 2 Grave Squirmers for Breakers if I'm playing a deck that sets a lot of cards. Breaker's good, he's a +1, he's not a -1, and he also makes the deck offensive. Now, people might not think this, but the thing is that Breaker changes how my deck is supposed to be. If I side out a Snowman or a Grave Squirmer for a Breaker, that makes the deck a lot more offensive, and it gets over stupid decks like that, or like, I don't know, stall decks, you know, Chain Burn, all of those cards. Breaker gets rid of all of that crap, and he makes my deck more aggressive and more offensive, and it works even better with the modern Apocalypse build. DD Crow gets over important cards, gets rid of important cards in the grave like Grapha. Let's see, what else did I used to banish? You know, Red Eyes Dark Dispel and Chaos Dragons. All of those really important cards, I run 2 DD Crows. Effect Veiler. Extra Veiler in case I'm playing Wind-Ups and Inzectors. Maxi, Wind Up, Wind Up, Wind Up. That's all it's here for. It's to stop Wind-Ups. Because I have to compete with them somehow. And I do use Maxi against other decks like Synchrons and stuff. But it's a pretty good card to side against most decks. Closed Forest. Dark Worlds, Gravekeepers. Mainly for Gravekeepers and at the same time it works for Dark Worlds. And any deck that randomly uses a field spell, Closed Forest is good for that. Prohibition. Mainly for Inzectors and Dark Worlds. I can use this card against anything, but I really use it against certain cards that I really struggle against. Like, Hornet is the one card that I probably use Prohibition the most on, because with that card even allowed, my deck is in trouble. I have to make it possible for nobody to use Hornet. Anybody who's playing Inzectors not to use Hornet, because Hornet is too much of a threat to the deck. Soul Release, I've made multiple references and videos why I love this card. This card is the shit. I don't know why people don't run it. I think people are, to be honest, I think people are stupid not to run this card in side decks. It is amazing. I don't care what anybody says saying it's too slow. This card is amazing, and it wipes out grave-oriented decks. Macrocosmos, mainly used for Inzectors. That's probably it. I don't use this card against anybody else because it kind of hurts my deck itself. Soul Drain, Mermails, Dark Worlds, and that's basically it. But it's really for Mermails because I struggle a lot with that deck too, and I also use it against Infernities. And as for my extra deck, Catastor, and I'm gonna say that, let me say before I go into the extra deck that my extra deck is based off of standard cards that may be able to come out. This deck isn't, the extra deck has no preference to any monster that I want to bring out. This extra deck is completely based on scenarios, and it is not based on cards that I have to bring out or want to bring out. The extra deck is completely optional in every way whatsoever. So, for example, if I have a Veiler and a level 4, I can make Catastor. If I have a Mole and a Mist Valley Soldier, or Mist Valley Soldier and a Snowman, I can make Black Rose. I mean, they're all scenario oriented. I used to run Iron Chain, but my friends convinced me to play Gaia, and I realized it was a stronger argument to play this card. Well, let me just say it's because, you know, 100 attack points can make a huge difference in the game. Gungnir Dragon, I guess I just run him because I happen to run 3 Snowmans, and a lot of times I sync Snowman with Mist Valley Soldier. Red Dragon Archfiend, really big beater to get over a lot of things. It gets rid of a lot of stupid stall cards like Marshmallow and Spirit Reaper. Scrap Dragon, it's basically another card to pop stuff that may negate my cards. And it's also a 2800 beater, so I mean, you can't really complain too much about Scrap Dragon. I can also use a cool combo where I use Scrap Dragon, blow up one of my own cards, and special summon ID. That combo's pretty cool. Stardust, generic level 8 monster, Adrius and Tyrus. I have a couple of scenarios. It doesn't happen too often where I have two IDs on the field. I mean, people say run something else, but it's rarely going to happen. I just like a variety of scenarios, so I run Adrius and Tyrus for that. Levier, Leviathan, Acid Golem, and Zen Mines. I always use those 4 cards with a Tour Guide engine or with a rank 3 engine. I always use those 4 cards. I never change them. And Utopia and Maestro are basically cards that are level 4s, and I have a lot of level 4s, and I think these are the 2 best ones. And that's the basics of an Apocalypse deck. Now, going on to this build, there's not much of a difference, so there's not going to be much explaining here. The only difference is that there's an extra monster and a less trap card. I got rid of 1 Dimensional Prison, and I added in 2 Tour Guides and a Sanguine in replace of 2 Grave Squirmers and a Dimensional Prison. That is the only difference between both decks. This deck is better, in my opinion, because it gives me that extra factor where I can summon a card when my opponent is not willing to attack me, and I can do something to them. It gives me the ability to bring out Levier a lot easier, which is great in combination with DD Warrior Lady. Tour Guide helps me stall with a more consistent Zen Mines option. She makes the deck a lot faster, and she also gives me that ability to run over a lot of cards, because a lot of times my deck can't kill cards by battle, so I always have to rely on monster effects, and Tour Guide lets me bring out, you know, a 25 to 3000 beater with these 2 cards. And that's basically it, guys. I mean, this is the Apocalypse deck that you guys have always wondered about. Everything else is the same. I explained it all in the other build, and I just want to say that I really think this Tour Guide build is by far the best build that I have. I don't think there's any other build that's better than this. I've made multiple decks. As you guys can see, I've been hiding this deck for a long time because I didn't think it was ready to be shown to the world yet, but I think it's time, and plus it's Christmas, so I want to give you guys a present for being great subscribers. I explained a lot today, and that's basically it, guys. I mean, I've made a lot of versions of this deck because I really wanted to make this deck competitive. Once I won my locals, I realized it was time to share this deck with people, because at first I didn't know what the heck I was building until I was really working on it. This is the Apocalypse deck, guys. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. I know this is about a 30-minute video. I tried to go as fast as I possibly could because there's a lot to explain when it comes to this deck. I already explained my weaknesses in the other videos. The main problem with this deck is, like I said, attacking power, and that's why I think this version's the most balanced Apocalypse deck you will ever find. It's a great mixture of offense and defense, and it has a lot of spells and traps that can basically like help the battle, but it's mainly focused on monster effects. And with that said, guys, I hope you have a Merry Christmas. It's really late right now. This probably will be uploaded on YouTube around 12, so it probably will be the day after Christmas. But thank you guys for watching all of my videos. I love you guys all. I love all of you guys. I mean, sorry, I'm like so rushed into this video, but I put a lot of time into making this video. I really wanted to give you guys the best Apocalypse deck that you guys can think about. There's other builds that you might want to check out. Maybe if you ask, I'll give it to you, but I just wanted you guys to know that I am willing to share this deck with you guys now. So if you have any questions, please rate, comment, subscribe, send me a message. I always respond, and have a Merry Christmas.